This is the second video for assignment number 5 off the playlist. And as I talked about in the first kind of intro, is that we're going to add a curtain wall to this. In our lecture, we talked about different envelope systems, and two of the most common, of course, are the opaque curtain wall or metal stud curtain wall and the glass curtain wall. And then, of course, a metal curtain wall uses a series of metal studs and different kinds of sizes of metal studs to build the curtain wall and then skin it. And a curtain wall, as we can see here in this slide, is outside of the structure. Notice here's the girder right here. Here's a beam. Here's the metal deck. Here's roofing insulation. Here's the floor deck for the floor below that. And notice that the curtain wall is all outside of the metal structure, just as you see here in this image. You can see here's a girder or a beam, and you can see that the metal studs are all on the outside of the structure. And so that's why it's called a curtain wall, because it drapes it like a curtain. Let's zoom back out here a little bit. And then, whoops. And you can see once again, and then that curtain wall is connected back to the structure itself. And that's what we're basically going to model, is this initial curtain wall. And it looks something like this. I mean, here's our metal deck, here's our concrete floor, and then here is a beam or a girder, and notice that the steel studs are connected back to it. Okay, and then what we result in is, well, this is another alternative, and that is to put it as an infill. But we're going to do the curtain wall. So to do that in Revit, the first thing we're going to do is go into architecture and go into walls. And we're going to get a wall right here, okay, architectural wall. And the reason this is called an architectural wall is because it really isn't a part of the structure of the building. It has structure in the sense that it holds itself up and retains forces in it, and also with curtain walls, it takes the lateral loads of wind, the wind lateral loads, and transfers it to the structure. But for the most part, it doesn't hold the building up, right? So it's called a architectural element. And then if we go into edit type, okay, we're going to go in here to this family, this wall family here that's been created. And this is a standard basic wall exterior brick on metal stud. And if we look at the construction of that, we'll see right here. Let's preview this, and I'll change this to section so we can see it in section. Here are the different layers, okay, that we see, and I'm just going to kind of walk you through those real quickly. If we go, let's start with the center. Well, no, let's start with the interior, and we'll go to the finish. Here's gypsum board, okay, so this is the interior side, and this is the exterior. So we have gypsum board here, and then we've got some kind of vapor retarder. This is sometimes put in buildings. You know, in Lubbock, you don't see much of this on the interior because we don't have the humidity problems, moisture problems that they have in other climates like in Houston or Dallas, but you probably would see this in some place like Houston. And then you'll see right here, the core boundary is the structure right here, and that's a 6-inch metal stud, okay? And notice that's right here. So the gypboard attaches to it, and then it's right here. And then the next layer right up there is they have is a plywood substrate. Remember, we talked about those were the basic layers of almost any of a metal frame or a wood frame building. And so we've got sheathing on the outside of that, and they've got 3/4 inch sheathing, which is fine. It might use smaller than that. And then the next layer is the air infiltration and moisture barrier. And you'll notice it has no zero because it's considered a membrane layer, and they're usually in microns, thousandths of a millimeter in thickness. And so they're really kind of hard to show, but you can, if we click right there and zoom in, maybe you can see the blue line. It's selected it, okay? And then the next thing out is an air layer. This is the space between the substrate and the brick that allows us, the masons, to put their fingers in there and lay this veneer. And then, of course, the last is the common brick, or the brick veneer finish, which is 3 5/8. So each one of those have been called out. What we're going to do is make a little adjustment to this. I'm going to OK out of this and go back to our basic right here. Let me see if I can shrink this down so it'll fit on the screen a little bit better. There we go. And we're going to duplicate this, okay? And what we're going to do is we're going to add some more insulation. We're going to add some rigid insulation to this. So we're going to say it's an exterior brick on metal stud, but width, we'll use a W/ to represent width, rigid insul, okay, for insulation. And we'll say OK to that. So we're going to go back in here now, and let's add our insulation. And where we would add it is right on top of this strub substrate, right before the membrane. Okay, so I'm just going to insert. It doesn't matter really where you are clicked, but if I hit insert here, you'll notice that it added another material right here in before the finish. But I'm just going to select that and move it down, okay, to where it's located where I want it. And that's right after the substrate. And of course, it's not a structure, it's a thermal or air layer. So I'm going to call it a thermal air layer. And then I'm going to go in here into my materials, and your material set should include this material, but I'm going to just type in rigid insulation, and you'll see now there's several that'll show up here, but the one I want you to choose is this one right here with the little picture like that. And the reason is because it's got all of its physical characteristics already in there. So I want you to know that's the thing about BIM, is that we can add a lot of information. So we know exactly what the R value, it's called thermal conductivity, but it eventually becomes the R value, and specific heat, density. Notice all these characteristics of that rigid insulation. You'll see appearance. Here, this is just how it's being shown. And then, identity, it's rigid foam insulation board. And so we're going to add that to our materials, and we're going to add an inch of it. And 1 inch is equal to an R5. So we're going to add an additional R5. Now, of course, we probably have insulation in the steel studs too. They're 6-inch studs, so we probably have a 6-inch bat in here. But that's not going to be shown here. That's actually would be shown in the detailed sections, and we'll do a couple of those at the end of towards the end of the semester. So, but anyway, now we have an inch. I'm going to add that in, and you'll see when I do, you'll see that it popped in right there, okay? And now I have an inch of insulation. Now, of course, my wall now is an inch thicker than it used to be because it's measured that out. The other thing is that I'm not overly happy with the way it's being represented here. It's too close to it's correct according to ANSI standards, but it's too close to my plywood with the symbology. So what I'm going to do is go back into rigid insulation into the material here and bring up the material, and then I will have to do it again. Rigid insulation, there we go. And what I'm going to do is you'll notice right here there's a whole series of settings. This is the surface pattern. So when we see the outside surface of this object, you'll notice when it's rendered or shaded, it's a mid-gray, okay, halfway gray. And then when it's cut right here, it's cut in the foreground. The pattern is this crosshatch. And I'm going to click on that because what I want is a tighter crosshatch so that it looks something more like this rather than the other way. So I'm going to apply that, say OK. And now you'll notice that it's been adjusted here in my view. So when I cut a section through this wall in Revit, these are what the materials are going to be symbolized as. So we're going to accept that. And so now we have our wall and we're ready to go. Notice it says stud with rigid insulation. And so we're ready to draw our walls. And what we're going to do, as we can see here, I'm going to click on this. As we can see right here, is that I drew these walls in segments of from floor to floor. And the reason is because that is probably the way it would be built. It may be built as continuous studs, as one big continuous wall. Matter of fact, I think I showed you an image just a few minutes ago of a building where that was 3 stories tall. Let's see if yeah, right here. Okay, notice they're using a very, probably a 6 or an 8-inch stud. Let's see if I can get here. Keep jumping around. Yeah. Let's go Shift, Control, let's zoom in a little bit. And you'll see the studs are continuous. Okay, so they're going from all the way to the ground floor. 1, 2, 3, 4, same height of our building, but with a single stud. But I broke this up so that it breaks at each floor. And there's different reasons for doing that. Best thing to do is work with your architectural consultants on metal stud, the senior people in your firm. So we're going to draw these walls. And I'm going to start with the first floor plan, because when I draw it, so I'm going to go and notice this time, before we used the structural plans, when we were doing the structure, now we're going to use the architectural floor plans. And so I'm going to go in here, and you'll see that the wall has already been drawn that I have shown you. It's got brick veneer on the outside. I'll zoom in a little bit here, and we can pick out some of the materials. Notice it doesn't have that insulation because it's using this designation of wall here without the rigid insulation. And we'll come back and correct and straighten that later, but we're not going to worry about that right now. And so what we're going to do is draw a wall basically around the perimeter of the building here. And so I'm just going to zoom in here. The first thing I'm going to do is, of course, go in here and select my walls. I'm going to walls, rigid insulation. The next thing I'm going to do is always set where I want the base constraint. So I want it to start on the finished floor surface, and I want it to end here on the second finished floor, okay, with no offsets. So these are set to 0. I'm going to apply that. And now we should be ready. The next thing I want to do is set where I'm going to put the wall in. And I'm going to place it by the core face interior. And the core comes from this right here. Remember, that's core boundaries, okay? So the interior core is this side of the metal stud, is the inside of the metal stud. The exterior core is the outside of the metal stud. And the metal stud is the only thing that's in the core. So I'm going to say okay to that and go back here. So the core face interior. And now we're ready. So I'm just going to place a wall right there, okay? It's not going the right direction. I want it to go the other direction, so I'm going to hit the space bar, and that's going to flip the wall. And notice the only thing that's inside of the steel stud is the sheetrock. Okay, I'm just going to click on this so we can look at this real quickly. You'll see my different layers. You'll see the gypsum board right here. Here's the metal stud, and then my sheathing, my plywood sheathing, my insulation that I added, my space, and of course the brick veneer. Okay, so that's what we're going to draw right there. And so we want the metal stud right next to the structure itself. So I'm going to exit. I'm going to delete that little piece of wall that I did and go back and draw another one. So I'm going to grab it right there. Once again, it's on the wrong side. Hit the space bar so it'll flip itself around. And then I'm going to zoom out here because I'm going to go down here to this very last column, and I'm going to snap to the very end of it. Now you always want to zoom in and make sure you're snapping to the right point, because if you're too far zoomed out, you're not really sure what you're going to be snapping to. And of course, if I had more resolution and a bigger screen, well, I do have that, but if I can't film it, so I wouldn't have to zoom in and zoom out so much. Okay. Now you'll notice that there's a couple of things when I drew the wall, and I'll show you. I'm going to zoom out again here, and we're just going to go all the way down to here. Okay. Boom. Okay. And once again, I need to go back in and make sure that I got to the end of that. Okay. There's one thing that I want to make sure, okay, is that I'm going to do this, and is that these are locked to those beams. So now I've got my wall. If I go back into my 3D view that I had open earlier, where is that? 3D walls right there. We can see that I have my wall here, okay, all the way around. Okay, I don't have it all the way up, but I've got it all the way around. So the next thing I can do is I could go to the second floor, set my second and third floor as my boundaries, and continue on up. But what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to copy these, and not that it's that per se faster, okay, but I just wanted to show you how you could do it. So I'm going to go over here to this view so that I can see all three of those walls. So you can see, I can see all three of the walls. I'm going to select that one, hold the control key down. See if I can get a hold of that one. Yep. And then I want this other one right over here. Hold the control and select that. So I've got all three of my walls. And now I'm going to just copy them up there. And to do that, once again, I'm not going to use this copy command, okay? Because I can't copy vertically with it, but I can with the clipboard. So I'm going to put those to the clipboard, okay? And there's a couple of ways that I could do that. The easiest is to go into the second level here, okay? And just tell it, oh, that's structure. Let's go into the, let's close that. And go into the second floor. There we go. Okay, so we can see the walls that we did just now, and you can see in gray the walls on the first floor. And so now I'm going to copy them right here, and I'm going to copy them as my last task here. So I need to go into modify, and I lost modify. There you go, paste. And then I'm going to place, I can do align to the same place. I can say align to the current view, or align to selected levels. And what I'm going to do is go in here and say align this to some selected levels. And that is the second level, and I'm going to hold the control key down and also select the third level. Okay, so I'm going to copy it twice. I'm going to align it to the second level and then to the third level. And there's going to be some overlap, and I'll show you that overlap, and I'll show you how we correct it here in just a minute. So now let's go back to our 3D view here. Whoop, wrong one. Okay. And what I want you to see is this overlap that's happening right here. And the reason that overlap here, let's go to this second wall. Okay. And you'll notice that it went to the second level, or the third level like it was supposed to, but it overlapped by 2 foot 8 inches. And that's because of the column links. It was trying to keep the same height as the columns themselves. So I'm just going to set that to 0 and hit enter. And you'll notice it'll drop that wall back. Okay. And I need to do that to all three of these walls. So I'm just going to set this to 0 so that there's no offset from level 3. And then let's flip around here, and I'll do the same thing there. So that's only, that's an issue you need to be careful about. Apply. Okay, so that's been fixed now. And the other wall here that we've got, let's see, did that? And that wall didn't go all the way to the top, did it? No. Okay, and so we have another wall here, and that went from the 3rd level to the, it should have gone to the top of the parapet, which it did, okay, which is where we want it. Same thing there, same thing there, okay. So we're just checking it out. And so this is kind of a long video. It's getting to be about 20 minutes. I just want to go here to the section, okay, and show you now our section here that we had structure, just structure only before. Now we have the curtain wall on the outside, and we're ready to label it and talk about it. Okay, in the next video, I'm going to show you how to clean the rest of this up.